Welcome, folks, to another episode of The Testing Planet. This is time for the news. It's very exciting. We have three wonderful reporters with us today. So just before I do that, I should introduce myself. I'm Simon Tomes, based in Teddington in the United Kingdom. Let's hand over to our reporters. So we have Andrea. Andrea, welcome.
Hey, Simon, thanks. Hello, here's Andrea speaking from Flensburg in continental Europe, and I head over to Parveen.
Hello, thank you so much. I am reporting from London, UK. I'm handing over to Mahathee.
Thank you, Parveen, for introducing me. I'm Mahathee and I'm reporting from Hyderabad, India. It's very hot here, but despite this, I'm managing this session.
Wonderful, folks. Well, this is very, very exciting. Now, today's topic of discussion, and we've got a lot to get through in this time, is the topic of testing tools. Now, love them or hate them, they are part of our daily life. They help us as testing, QA, and quality engineering professionals, and they support us in many, many ways. So we were really curious to ask lots of questions to the community. We put out a number of polls to find out what people think about tooling, how people find out about tooling, how it helps, whether we have an obsession with tools, what sort of tools we're using, and all things related to testing tools. So we're going to dive on in, share our thoughts and insight, and bring in some live feeds from the community. We've got a lot of people sending in some stuff as we put out these polls. So let's get started. Okay, folks, so our roving reporters, we had poll number 1 that went out. The question we asked the community was this: how do you discover new tools to help with your testing? Okay, and the results coming in, we had a number of results actually. So in a first place, or 56% of the community shared that they discover new tools from the testing community. How wonderful. But we'll come to the analysis in a bit. We also had about 20% of respondents saying that they rely on technology news to find about new tools. 15% rely on team members to introduce new tools to them. And around about 10% of people learn about new tools during an event or conference. Great. So let's get our initial reaction from our reporters. Feel free, one of you, to jump on in and share your thoughts about these results.
Yeah, I think when I see the results, my first initial reaction is like, yeah, of course, like most of them, what the responses that we have is like all of the above. Like I was really interested. I know the first one is from community. Top is community, which is like, yeah, I mean, pretty much personally, I get to know a lot of tools from the community, but my reaction was like, yeah, pretty much all the most of the people saying that from like community, from the conferences, from like knowing from the within the team or from the friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mahathee, any further thoughts on the results as they came in?
Yes, Simon. So I could relate to this question a lot. Although I answered personally as conferences and meetups, I would have preferred there would have been an option as all of these. But here in India, many people learn about tools through conferences and meetups because we have various vendors who sponsor these meetups and conferences, and it's a primary way of how people learn about things. Although I've attended a lot of developer conferences in the recent past, so these have been an abundant source for me to learn about things, and curious teammates and good friends in the community who have taught me about certain tools they are using. And when you explore a tool, for example, if you are using Postman for API testing, what are the alternatives that you can use for API testing apart from Postman? Like there is a site called alternative.to. So if you plug in what tool you're using, it generates a list of options that you have. So these are a few things that I could think of when you said how do you learn about tools. So these were some of the insights from India.
Love it. That's wonderful insights. And I think I love the way you amplify the reliance on finding out from others. So of course we can use tools, and the tool you mentioned sounds great, that you can put something in it gives you alternatives. there's something cool, I think, when we as a profession discover a tool and we are open about like how we find it useful or some of the challenges we face, and also share our context of why we find it valuable. It's kind of like use a tool and pass it on. And I think that kind of goes with us as community professionals to kind of share about this stuff, because it may help someone somewhere else that you never meet in some way. They may read a post or a comment, or they may be listening to a session like this where they can find something that they didn't even know existed, just because they just haven't had the chance to do the research, or they've not done an internet search. They've discovered something via the community. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Andrea, from your side, any further insights on this particular topic?
I mean, just to echo a lot what Parveen and Mahathee already mentioned, yes, the testing community is a great source of learning about new tools. Well, me personally are surprised a bit, and I don't know how salespeople will take that result that events and conferences, maybe sponsored by tool vendors, are not the top for learning about new tools. I personally feel that's just amplifies and resonates with the community because they found tools which are useful to them, solve their problems, and they just spread the word. So that is something really cool. I'm not sure how salespeople respond on that though, but I'd like to quickly highlight a message chiming in from Konstantin Sakchinsky. He mentioned that he's learning about tools while he has a problem or a task to solve. And I feel that is a very pragmatic approach how to deal with tools, because I mean, we are all testers, we are working in tech, we like tools, no doubt about that. But how much use has a tool if we don't have any job or any problem we can apply it for?
Wonderful insight, Andrea. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, good stuff for calling out Konstantin. We've got a few other things coming in from the community. I see that Orly Cow, they mentioned that they follow 2 to 3 big voices on LinkedIn when they usually post about it. Wow. So relying on just a small subset of superstar people that are sharing stuff about tooling. I love it. It was interesting to read from Conrad Bram. He mentioned forums are my best place to find tools because human natural language has a way of just describing what a tool is good for so much better than any docs or wiki page can. Forum users also tend to happily add all the health warnings for tools that don't really solve the problem. I like that framing, a health warning. I wonder if, I guess perhaps tool vendors, for clear reasons, perhaps don't discuss the health warnings that come with some of their toolings. So it's good that you get that balance of, I guess, claims that a tool vendor can make, and rightly so that they need to amplify their product, and tool vendors are part of our ecosystem and are part of our community, and we should support them, and they can support us if we want to look at it that way. I think to Conrad's point, I love that he highlights that you can have these deeper discussions about a tool and how it's helped and how it has a health warning. I do like that framing.
Yeah, I think while I was reading through, I think I even liked the comment from David as well. What they mentioned is like, they're surprised they don't see the option for internet over there, which is like, yeah, I guess that's another option, right? Like, based on based on the problems, or if you're looking for something, some kind of tools, or like maybe you want to compare those tools as well. So yeah, internet, like literally, I think that's the comment that made me think like, yeah, definitely that's a very obvious option, because that's what they said, right? That's usually my first go-to part, discovering the tools. um, so pretty much I can relate to that. Like, of course, like I think what happens is like from conferences or meetup, it's more like when you go there, you kind of get an exposure. But I think when you kind of are looking for some specific um, tool for any specific task, or like anything, like maybe you're trying to look for something, I think that's where internet becomes the go-to, where you can get the list of, like, maybe someone has written a blog about what they have found, like how they reviewed, or these days I think that's one of my on the list as well, where people write the blogs and how the experience has been with certain tools, so that comes up. So I think, yeah, I would say like definitely internet is something the first go to. I kind of agree with what David has mentioned
And
there.
breaking news coming in from Rahul Pawel. Rahul has been trying to kind of solidify what's being shared, and I think he sums it up nicely, that tool hunting is like a trekking trip. It is filled with ups and downs, which I think really resonates, right?
So true, and filled with slippery slopes as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I can make an assumption that perhaps all of us on this, all of us reporting from our various places across the globe today, have all experienced the excitement of like, oh, this is the one, this is the tool that's going to solve it. To find out that through some pain that it's caused more problems than perhaps um, envisaged at the start. And I think it perhaps is, without sounding a little bit too old, it feels like a bit of a rite of passage for us testing professionals to have mixed emotions with various tools throughout our career. So, yeah, keep on searching, keep on discovering, and also. I think a key message coming through the comments that are coming through now and through the poll is to keep sharing, keep telling stories about how certain tools are helping, and also be sure to include a health warning with these toolings. Very good. Okay, right. Well, so we have poll number 2. Let's jump onto that. And this is an interesting one. We're very curious to find out how people learn how to use a new tool. So people have discovered it, they're giving it a go. They're like, well, where do I start? What do I do? How does this work? So this question went out. So we asked, how do you prefer to learn how to use new software testing tools? And there were 4 options available. One of them was using them. The other was courses or YouTube. The other was blogs or books. Now, interestingly, the results came in as follows. Around about 2% of people learn from a book, roughly 4% from blogs, 34% approximately courses or YouTube, and 60% say they learn how to use a new tool by using it. Absolutely fascinating results there. I wonder, Mahathee, any thoughts on those results?
Oh yes, Simon, I can totally relate to this. I myself prefer the option of using it rather than looking at some YouTube videos because it helps me remember it forever. I don't have to really put in that effort to go through and come back again. But then, like Gerard had mentioned in his replies, I follow, learn, apply, and teach. That's the best way I would also suggest because while learning, you will face a lot of difficulties or challenges in terms of setting up the tool. If your setup of the tool is done right, it's half the problem solved. And the kind of problem you're applying this tool to, that is the next part of it. And your own experience with the tool. Overall, you can create an experience report around it. So once when I had to use Catalan, I referred to Michael Bolton's report, experience report on the tool, and I could totally experience what he felt while using it because I had a similar kind of an experience as opposed to books because books don't give the intricacies or the knacks or the problems that you face while using a tool. Although I recently switched to documentation part for learning a particular tool. I started applying this when I switched to Playwright because Playwright is the most popular tool available in the market now. All the Selenium is in demand. So documentation plays a great role. But YouTube videos are also quick ways to learn tools and it's easier. But the problem with YouTube videos is that sometimes tool versions change and some features change. And the solutions that they give in those videos may or may not apply. So that is where you face a problem. So this is what I can relate to.
And Parveen, based in London in the United Kingdom, any further thoughts on this particular poll?
Yeah, I think I absolutely can yeah, agree with what Mahati said, right? Like most, so I think from the results, I think that's the key, that's the thing, like follow, like learn, apply, and teach. I think that's something that definitely relate to, and I kind of try to follow for my own self as well, because I think again, like, I know it is an interesting poll, right? Like, maybe sometimes people, by looking at the like, the comments as well, it's pretty much, few people are talking about by job training and trying to learn looking at the documentation. So I guess the way I have used is like, I look at the documentation and follow some of the tutorials, and then try to have some basic understanding, and then get my hands on, like, and then whenever I'm kind of stuck, and I need to go back and understand why it's doing certain thing. And I think that's where I try to yeah, just look at it, because given any tool, you can see so many YouTube videos out there, right? So just getting the feel of like where you're having problems, and maybe you can try to see how they have solved it, or how their approach has been to using certain tool. For example, if you pick Playwright, for example, right? So just, I think, not it's interesting to see that results as well, like YouTube, course on YouTube 37.5%, and using them is 48.8. So I wonder, like, again, this is a question I might ask, like, I wonder if that is because you take up the course, you kind of go through the whole course, and then you kind of trying to do it by yourself and following both of them, like using them hand in hand, and using the YouTube tutorials to refresh yourself of what you're doing to plan your learnings, I guess. So I think that's the question to the community back.
Andrea, feel free to jump on in and share your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, well, but no surprise, I think that's the key to learning new tools, blended learning. Like Parveen said, like Mahathee said, also like the community says, get started, get stuck somewhere, search for a tutorial, search for a course, maybe start with a high level overview. I mean, we are talking about year 2024. I'm still find it funny that people reply with books for tools. I mean, I'm that old that I need to learn to code on the paper, but I still like found that hilarious that people still rely on books. I think blogs are a good part to learn about tools, how to get started, especially what Mahathee mentioned, the experience report are a great source because the people point out where they got stuck so you don't fall into the same trap. Courses, YouTube, they are all like have a very reason to be there because people are consuming them also a lot. Sometimes I have a bit of trouble personally with YouTube videos because I don't want to watch 30 minutes if I don't see the answer to my question in that. So then like blogging or searching in the internet can be a quicker go-to, but I think the blended learning is the key here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrea, in Germany. Now, I was, curious about the number of respondents about blogs. My assumption would be that that'd be slightly higher. I think to your point, Andrea, that like specific thing, maybe someone's doing a blog series on a particular tool and they're like turning it into a bit of a tutorial. Surprised to see that number as low as it was from our respondents. But yeah, these polls are out there. These results can't lie. They are an interpretation of the question. And I think the point about blended learning is fascinating, that maybe people go through these stages and work hand in hand with the various options that they have available to learn about software testing tools. Absolutely fascinating. Okay, well, we have another poll that we should jump into, right? So this is poll number 3, and we asked the community, as a testing profession, how obsessed are we with tools? Okay, because we talk a lot about tools. Our assumption is that they always come up in conversation. Perhaps there's always a debate about, is it that tool or this platform or framework that is the best or is the most appropriate in this context? So we thought, let's try and settle this debate. I don't think we settled it, but the results were very interesting. So here we go. So I'll repeat the question and give it from lowest to highest. So we had, as a testing profession, how obsessed are we with tools? 11% of respondents said not at all, no obsession. 15%, the opposite end, said way too much. Like, we are really obsessed with tools. And then 27% of respondents came back and said somewhat. And 48%, so pretty much half of respondents on this particular poll, replied with a good amount. Now, I'd love to get your take on this. Andrea, feel free over in Germany to jump on in and share your reflections on these results.
Oh, yes, Simon, certainly, thanks. Well, to me, honestly, those requests came in by no surprise. I mean, we are testers, so we are curious people. We want to learn new stuff. We jump on every chance to test new software. Why should we not jump on the chance to test a new and shiny tool, which is just around the block? I get that, and I mean, we're in tech for some reason. If we would not be tool obsessed at all, we probably would not work in tech today. My assumption. So the results didn't surprise me that much. Of course, we need to take it in a balanced approach. Just jumping on every new tool which is around comes with certain costs. You need to learn them. We just talked about how the learning goes. It doesn't happen overnight. Also, it needs to fit into the overall tool stack. You may need to consider a team, which is also there and using another tool. Do they really want to switch every half a year because you found something new? There are certain things to consider. And I also have seen there is a quite interesting conversation going on in the community, how to choose a perfect tool. So that maybe as a further reference for people interested. And just to finish my observation with a final comment, which I found super interesting, coming in from Keith Carpentier, who had a bit of a critical voice in that, who said that he was stating the importance that it's not only about the tools, but also about the skills as a tester. So the tool obsession and that we're always talking about test tools, the new test framework. Selenium is dead, but now we have Playwright and maybe Cypress. I think we should be careful not to forget about the things which also makes us testers, like curiosity, critical thinking, question asking, starting conversations. And that's what Keith is pointing out. And that's a really good point to make.
Absolutely. And we have a bit of a breaking news coming in from Chan Ho Sang. So Chan Ho Sang says, just like any other professions, tools play a crucial role in ensuring efficiency and accuracy, where it can efficiently detect anomalies, performance bottlenecks, and other complex issues that might not be easily discernible to the human eye. However, and this is the important part, it only works best when combined with the insights and critical thinking abilities of human. Hence, not a replacement for human expertise and judgment, but I do need to perform. Need it to perform my work. So that kind of amplifying your points there, Andrea, and the point of Keith is that we can't forget that, why are we testers in the first place? We are kind of not just there to use the tool and that's that, which I found very interesting. So Mahathee, over in India, feel free to jump on in and share some thoughts on these results.
Oh yes, Simon. I was just looking at the results, and I'm surprised as to how 11% of the people said we are not so obsessed. Either they are not using tools or they are not aware. I am just thinking from their viewpoint. But as a tester, although critical thinking, questioning, and a lot of other skills which Andrea mentioned are essential combined with tools, sometimes the fear of missing out also helps you, also makes you jump onto tools. I think especially with AI in picture, this obsession is getting even more because the existing vendors say they have AI based integrations, and this creates a lot of curiosity for developers, testers, and everybody working on software engineering teams. So I would say in India here, definitely people are obsessed with the usage of tools, especially. And in the space of automation, especially, I could relate this tool obsession. Any other new tool that comes in the automation space, they are very eager to try them out and use it to their use case. And also, the first question they would ask is, does this tool have an AI integration, which makes me think that are the real testing skills gone for a toss, or they're really considering them. So as per me, I would say tools and technology will come and go, but the real testers are here to stay.
Wonderful stuff there. Thanks for your insight, Mahathee. Parveen, before we move on to the next poll, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much Andrea and Mahathee mentioned everything what's about the tooling, right? Especially as software testers, as we are very curious to know when something comes out and missing out when some new tools comes in. And I got surprised to see that poll result, right? I was thinking like maybe there'll be a bit more under way too much option, but again it's just I take this as more like it's up to people, right? It's not about thinking about the tool as a replacement, but how can it make us more efficient. It's not replacing our critical thinking, or it's not replacing like any tool. Like think of like automation, think of like any like any tools that are more helpful for us, like from taking the notes till automating. Like there are so many different categories in tools, right? So it's about just making use of those for the efficiency, and not thinking about like how can we replace certain things, like because um, the role that we play as testers, right? Like we that's definitely not replaceable. The way we think, the way we apply the question asking skills, I think those kind of things are definitely not replaceable. And I think pretty much a few comments there has they have already mentioned there, right? Like tools there are a lot of tools coming in, and we can't keep up with, we can't learn. I think this is another thing, like having peace with saying that we cannot learn every tool that is coming into the market. So we can't just keep running. Like imagine like initially, like if we talk about automation, right? We were like, oh, let's learn Selenium, and then came Cypress. Let's learn Cypress, and then came Playwright, and then now it's AI. So it's like you'll keep getting new tools. So having some peace at it, saying that okay, I'm like fine, like these are the tools that I are in the market is fine. If I am interested, I'll explore. But it's not, you cannot use every tool in your context, right? Because you keep moving the jobs, and every organization has a different setup, and you kind of end up like just learning for the upskilling yourself maybe. But I think that's where you need to understand, maybe you need to think, are you learning for using it, or are you learning because you're missing it out? And you just need to understand that you can't learn every tool that's out there.
And we have a message coming through from Naveed Ali. And they say, for me, they play an important role. The right tools in the right hands of the right testing QA professionals, a great combination. Great advice there from Naveed Ali. Thank you, Naveed. Okay, folks. Well, thank you for hanging on in there. We are exploring the topic of testing tools, having a great discussion, bringing in some insights from the community, and sharing our thoughts on a number of polls that we have run with the community. Now, let's take the next poll here. And this is a yes or no answer type of poll. We were super curious to see how people feel about the test tools that are available. So we asked the following question: are you satisfied with the test tools that are available to you today? Now, in some cases, it was a pure 50-50 split. 50% of people saying yes, 50% of people saying no. On another poll, it was 60% of respondents saying yes, they were satisfied, and 40% saying no, they were not satisfied. Now, this is very, very interesting. And yeah, we've got some comments coming in from the community about this particular poll. And yeah, you just got a thumbs up from me. There we go. So let's put it out to one of our reporters. Mahathee, feel free to jump on in and share your thoughts about this 50-50 split of, are we satisfied with test tools?
Yeah, a very interesting response so far from about all the polls that have come. So in this, I'm very curious to know why there was a split, because even my answer would be yes and no. because whenever I think of a tool and its need, it's very subjective and contextual. So every tool has a fitment to a problem and to a problem that is solving. So we can't say we are going to use the same tool in every place. So according to our need and context, we might be changing the tools that we use probably. For example, if one tool fits in for me, it would not suit Andrea or Parveen or you, and it might also suit. So I'm very curious to know that. I wish they could have even put in their answers as to why they replied yes and why they replied no. It would be really helpful, and I could gauge their emotions behind the responses, which would be an interesting insight.
Yeah, absolutely, Mahathee. And I guess a few folks are getting in touch with us with a few responses as to their reasons why. Um, so let's take an example here. So Tom shares that in the main, yes, for automation especially. And Tom shares that Cypress and Playwright have shaken things up, which is refreshing. Selenium WebDriver was getting a bit stale with no competition. So good reminder that perhaps competition in the tooling market is a good thing. It helps push things forward. It helps keep tool vendors on their toes. They continue to innovate, and rightly so, right? We shouldn't stand still. I think, given our context as testing professionals, any application we're working on, my assumption is that all of us are looking to improve that, to make it a better experience for the people on the receiving end of those products and services. So I guess our goal is to help testing tools improve as well. So yeah, that's a good one from Tom coming in as well. Andrea, anything else that you're seeing from the community as well?
What I also see is there was someone I don't exactly know, especially who said, "Well, if I don't find the tool which suits my needs, I just create my own."
Yes.
That's a nice go-to, but I mean, on the other side, it then is very particular for only your context. So some people may be driven to create their own tools because for the sake of doing it, for the challenges, and that's really nice to see. But then it sometimes comes also with the cost that it is hardly transferable to other aspects, to other projects, to other tooling, to other. If you change the language, it might not work anymore. If you change or update to a new operating system, it does not work anymore. So that's maybe a thing you need to consider if you start creating your own test tools. And what I also find particularly interesting, that there seems to be also a movement in the community that people are not so happy with that tools getting forced onto them, especially for management administrative part. I mean, there are also tools we need to consider, not only the tools we use to create our automation, but also the administrative stuff we have to deal with as testers.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Andrea. Parveen, any final thoughts on this poll, the results, and perhaps some commentary coming in from the community as well?
Yeah, I think it was interesting. It was interesting to see the thought process around why, like, how people are thinking about yes and no, specifically around their context. And I like how Sarah has mentioned about that the tools are currently marketed as testing tools don't help the tester by making it easier to report or easier to plan testing, which I found it interesting, especially because I think when we uh, which might be something that few people might have said no to, because like when we think about tools, right, pretty much we think about maybe automation or maybe like pretty much like different type of tools, right? So I think that's where I liked it is very interesting what Sarah has said, right? Like what tools do we have around like test planning, or do we need any tools? Like do we have any tools around specific test reporting? And I think what else, like they have also mentioned about so this causes the tester to have to do this kind of admin in addition, which could be like based on the context, right? It could be admin, or it could be for auditing if you're working in financial industry. So I think I do feel like there's some little bit some lack of some kind of testing tools around there yet. So, which is why even my answer would be no, kind of to the poll in some way, because yeah, there are a lot of tools. I think yeah, I won't say that saying no is just because not to say that there are not many tools. There are a lot of tools, but multiple tools for the same things, but maybe there are not tools for some to solve some other problems which testers have, like
Yeah, thank you, Parveen. And your point is an important one around perhaps the unforeseen costs of using tooling to support our efforts. Like, is there some extra, not just the training and learning of that particular tool, but does it create some extra activities that were unforeseen, and what impact does that have, and is it worth investing in having that extra cost on top of using just the tool itself? Perhaps that's one as a community for us to consider and sort of dig into a little bit deeper. But we don't have time to dig into it that deep today, but perhaps one to continue over in the various places with Ministry of Testing. We have one final poll that we put out, and this was an open-ended one. So we asked the community, what tools are in your testing stack? Now, we received lots and lots of lists of responses, and I guess before I pass on to our other wonderful reporters with us today, it was curious to see that when somebody runs an exercise to really think about the tooling that they're using, that my assumption is it probably ends up being more than you initially think when you think, oh, what's the tooling I'm using? So that was my interpretation. We had lots of lists just for one person, a really good amount, say up to maybe 12 to 15 tools, perhaps on average, maybe around that number, 10 to 15 of the kind of core number of tools that people are using. People would also include tools that perhaps are more on the project management side of things and not necessarily the thing you would do as part of your day-to-day testing activities. So it's interesting, like the interplay between the number of tools that you can use to support you and kind of your core set of tools, stuff that you kind of use a bit, and maybe stuff that you're using every so often. And I wonder if there's a model appearing that each person as an individual could run that exercise, like what's your core set, your intermediate set, and your further away set. But yes, I'd love to get more insight. Any further thoughts on the replies that came back? Did you spot any patterns? Is there any commonality between the results, or was it all very random?
Yes, Simon. So when I gazed through the results, I could say that there were some common tools and also some new tools that I noted down, like Sublime, mentioned by one of the respondents. I've never tried that. And also, when people are replying about the tools they use, their first thought goes to test automation, because as testers, people think Selenium, Playwright are the only tools. So you can think about any micro tools also. Notepad is a tool, Notepad++, many other tools, anything that helps you do your work efficiently and is giving you some amount of productivity can be considered as a tool. So I would say an Excel file is also a tool if you think of it. And when also think about the different areas in testing, for example, requirements. So to gather, when you're doing a requirements planning, or you're exploring requirements, so some tools that you can use a mind map like Xmind or any other mind mapping tools to brainstorm your ideas. So that is a good tool to think of, and it has helped me a lot. I've been using Xmind for about 2 years now, so it helps me in many stages. Then what tools are you using for your test design? Test designing is an important place. People directly jump to test execution part, and what tools can you run your tests with. But what tools can you think of in the test designing stage? Again, Xmind can also help you in the test designing stage. So when you think about tools, just don't narrow yourself. And what tools are you using for your screenshots? Like there are multiple options. For example, I've used a tool called Bird Eats Bug. It has an interesting feature that this also usually most bug tracking tools don't capture console. They only give the network. This tool gives console and the network, and is very user friendly. So anybody would not have that much of a learning curve. Even if you introduce it to a new team member, he will easily be able to learn the tool. So when you think of tools, I feel the first thing should be how easy it is to use, and is your team able to adapt to that tool easily without any kind of hardships or difficulties. Even if there are small challenges, it's okay, but are they able to use it? And a good amount of community help or support, documentation, or any people from the tooling department who will be able to help you navigate through this. So when this poll came, I was quite interested to see people telling me I also put a random list as a response, but I wanted to see why they are putting these tools. What are the areas they could consider apart from test automation, or generally, if you use Sublime, what are you using Sublime for? Or if you are using a Loom or anything, I'm tell the reason. Some people have responded in detail, telling what they are using it for. So this is my insight.
Andrea, what did you make of the results?
So what we can clearly see from the results from what the community said is that there's a vast amount of tools. And as Parveen said, we cannot learn all of them. I mean, we can, but then we have no time for real testing probably, and not a job. And to echo what Mahathee says, initially the idea when we talk about tools for testers, the first thing that jumps in our mind is automation tools. Then there are the micro tools, but I even would go a bit further on a broader view. I mean, all the lists here contains now the tools we have in our computer, which is software. But we also can use pen and paper, and we can even use our brain, which is also a great tool to have. So it is really good to open the view and think sometimes from another perspective, and not to be too narrowed on just on test automation tools.
Wonderful. And Andrea, a good reminder for folks, they can read an article of yours called Tiny Software Testing Tools, Big Difference in Testing Results. This is a great one that you put out, learning about how you can make a big difference using lots of tiny testing tools. And you encourage the reader to think about what tooling means to them and kind of take a little bit of a step back and find various tooling in various contexts that can help you with your day-to-day efforts. So yeah, worth checking out, folks. It's a great article. Thank you for writing that one, Andrea. Excellent. Parveen, final thoughts on the results here?
Yeah, I think pretty much. I would say like pretty much going what both like Andrea and Mahathee said, right? It is like you can see the pattern right in the comments. I can see like from the results that we have, pretty much everyone has put down like any tool or every tool that they can think of, like whatever the category is, like it's pretty much everything out there, like every tool that we are using. Like again, the question is like, are these all testing? Like the question itself was like testing, what's your testing stack, right? To what tools do you have in your testing stack? But I think when I see that, it's of course like note taking. Like I can see pretty much people have written down some of the security testing tools or a lot. But yeah, I think that's where like it's so when as testers, I think when we think about tools, it's we kind of like just putting out like whatever tools that we are using on a day-to-day basis, whether it's like Slack or Teams or like anything, like uh, but not specifically thinking about maybe going into detail of like, okay, what tools do we use from like from like again going back to requirements capturing or note taking, and then executing different types of tests, like whether it's like exploratory testing or even automation testing or API testing, because again that's yeah, so quite a lot. And I can see interestingly like few people also have written Grafana over there, which is again like the whole feedback from the production side of things. And so I guess it's just a list of quite a long list of what tools do we have in terms of like what do we use on a day-to-day basis, which is interesting. Like I can see the same pattern going around, like everyone like just trying to just drop in uh, every tool out there. So yeah, I think it would be interesting to hear, like, as a next set of questions coming out of this is like, what tool do you use? So what are the how do you use the tool that you mentioned? Like, what is the purpose? Because everyone might be using for the same tool for different purposes. So that will be an interesting thing to understand with, because there are so many tools out there in the list which I've never heard of, which is good to see. Like, so maybe I'm now going to go back and try to research some, what is this tool? So that's a question back. Whatever tools have been mentioned, how do they use and for what purpose? I think that will be an interesting.
Absolutely. Great questions there. And no doubt we can get these questions out there. And I feel you make me think about, Parveen, just like how people use them, and maybe they run an exercise where they map, during this part of the development life cycle. I guess it depends on their context. We tend to use this tooling, and then at this point we're using this tooling. As you sort of mentioned, like post-release monitoring and all of that stuff, like, them tracking tooling in their own cycle, whether that's like multiple daily releases or releasing every 2 weeks or major releases every quarter, that kind of thing. I'd be curious to track the how the velocity, so to speak, of when those toolings are used. I'm also curious, I couldn't spot, and maybe this is because in the question it says the word testing stack, but I was curious not to see tooling around kind of goal setting or performance management. So I think I kind of, while we may not directly think, oh, this is part of our testing stack, I think us, as we set goals as individuals with our teams and with our managers, has a big influence on where we go with our testing efforts. Whether it's like, as part of your goals, it might be, well, I want to learn 3 new tools this year, or I want to get better at this thing. So the goal setting tooling, I wonder if that also plays a part in your testing stack. Maybe not, it's not an immediate response that comes to mind, but perhaps it's something to consider. And then therefore, when you think of the tooling around goal setting, how that influences the actual tools that you end up using in your context. Something to think about. Okay, everyone. Wow. I'm just doing a quick time check. I've got a feed coming in from our producer, who is giving us a little bit of an indicator to say it's time for us to wrap up today's episode of the Testing Planet. We have jumped into the news. We have looked at some polls. We've had a wonderful discussion. So we go round and sign off. So it's Simon Tomes here from Teddington in the United Kingdom, signing off for today. Andrea.
Okay, that was Andrea about the update on testers tool status from continental Europe and Flensburg. Bye for now.
And Parveen, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Parveen from signing off from London, UK. Over to you, Mahathee.
And Mahathee saying bye from Hyderabad, India. It was great recording this episode of the Testing Planet.
Wonderful, folks. Well, stay connected, keep chatting, keep exploring our testing trends, and let's keep the conversation going and take some action off the back of these results. Signing off for today. We'll see you in another episode. Bye for now.